Hey, what is up everybody, Reubin here. My name's Reubin and welcome back to Car Mechanic Simulator 2015. So, we are actually making some progress. In the last episode, we were able to do a couple more jobs. We're sitting on 1,200 XP. We've now got $5,400 to our name. So, it's simply a case of now building on that platform. So, once again, we've got to choose a job over here and see what we have available to us. So, on the Reno Piccolo, we've got the car is hard to control and then sloppy car steering. I think we can actually have a look at possibly doing both of those. And with it being the steering, it is most probably going to be something under the car itself. So let's have a look over here quickly. So it's the inner tie rod and the steering rack that is a problem on this one. So it's quite simply just a case of popping over here. Take the inner tie rod and then we need the steering rack. There we go. Now this needs to be moved over to one of the lifters. And then while that's busy moving over, we're also going to take this job where the car's handling seems to be a problem. Now this could also once again be something to do with the inner or outer tie rods or something a little bit more complicated. And it's quite literally just the outer tie rod. So it's also going to be a very, very easy fix. It's literally just that one part. It's either on this side or it's on the other side. And if we do that, can't actually see, to be honest. There we go, found it. It's the front right hand tires. So, simply a case of let's move this over to the right lifter. Now because this job is the easier of the two, I'm going to start off with that one. But this one I'm also going to raise up. And then while that one's busy raising up, we're going to jump in over here and have a look. So as we can see, it is the outer tie rod over here that is a problem. It is looking quite bad, but in order for us to get to it, we need to take off the wheel. So the nice thing is, with the last upgrade we got in the previous video, fastening and unfastening bolts now is 3 times faster. So our jobs will become a little bit quicker. Obviously, the faster our jobs go, the more we can do, the more money we can start earning. So simply a case of replacing it with the new one, and then putting the new rim back on the tire. Well, the new rim, the old rim back on the car. So that should be a case of that one basically done. $41, not a massive job, but it gave us some XP and a little bit of cash. Once again, nothing massive, but worth it in the end. Obviously, every single job you do benefits you in the case of cash and XP, because at the end of the day, you do need about 100,000 to be able to unlock everything in your garage, because as far as I'm aware, I think the paint booth is about 25,000. The testing section for the suspension and the brake is about 15,000, and the car parking lot, in order to store some cars that you buy at auction, that's about 50 grand on its own. So first thing we need to do is obviously take off the outer tie rod, remove the inner tie rod, but in order for us to replace the steering rack, we need to remove the other side's tire as well, because the outer tie rod and the inner tie rod on this side have to come off as well before we can take it off. Okay, so it's simply a case of now removing the steering rack, switching over and selecting our new part. Put the old one back to where the old one was, and put the old outer tie rod back on. There we go. Simply a case of now putting the wheel back on. There we go, and then switching over to this side. And there we go. So we've now got this car basically done. Just got to put this tire back on, and then that is 2 jobs nice and quickly, not even 4 minutes, and those 2 jobs are done. And we got $1,600 from that job, quite simply because I think the steering rack itself is about $800 on its own, plus labor and the complete tasks bonus. We got quite a bit of cash from that. We didn't get the most XP from that, obviously, with it being such a small job, it didn't give us the most, but we are focusing on building up some cash at the moment so that we can later, when everything is unlocked and we're in a good place for everything, we can look at going to an auction, buying a car. And the nice thing is, when you get to that point, there's no longer a need to have to do these jobs. You don't have to do client work anymore, because quite simply later on you'll be buying beat down vehicles, completely stripping them, replacing the body parts, fixing the frame itself, repainting the vehicle, replacing every single part in the engine for a bit of a profit. Not a bit, it's actually quite a large profit. And yeah, and then basically you start progressing that way. Now, when you reach that point, that is basically where you can say you are reaching the end of the game. But, however, there isn't quite actually an end to the game. The game will just go on forever and continue. You'll just continuously do jobs and do restorations. There's no real end to it. But once you reach that point, you can comfortably say you've unlocked the parking garage, you've unlocked the testing facility, you've unlocked the paint booth, and you've taken a couple of cars out for a drag race. You've bought a couple of cars at the auction house, fully restored them, either gone for a classic restoration, a authentic restoration, or a modified restoration. And yeah, the job is basically yours then. So on this one, the problem seems to be the front drive axle C, the rear wheel, thank you, the rear wheel hub, the rub bushing, the steering rack once again, and then the rear end link. So we start off with the drive axle C. Drive axle C. There we go. Next part we need is the rear wheel hub and a bushing. Rear wheel hub. Standard and a standard rubber bushing. Next thing we need is the steering rack and the rear end link. So this rear end link is that one, and then the steering rack. So the steering rack, once again, is basically something we did in the last job, so it's quite simple. Let's put it on the right lifter for this one. Okay, so once again, the car has to go up. Because quite simply, all the work we're doing is under the car. So it doesn't really matter now because we have to remove both front wheels, so I'm not really worried about wasting any time. Because quite simply, well, we have to get under both of them. And the nice thing is with us removing that wheel as well, it allows us to loosen the front drive axle, because that needs to be replaced. Then we have to go ahead and remove the outer tie rod, then the inner tie rod, then the same on the other side. There we go. Okay, remove the outer tie rod and the inner tie rod again. Oh, damn. It's actually unbolted. And then the steering rack itself. Now, before we start replacing parts in the front, you know what? Let's actually finish up the front. There's nothing else that we need to do on the front. The other two parts, if I'm not mistaken, are at the back. The rubber bushing, however, we need to find. So that means going through all of the rubber bushing. I think there's 8 on this car, and just finding the one that is a problem. But let's switch over to construction mode again, or assembly mode, and let's put these new parts back into place. Bolt that one back on and slap the tire on again. Okay, we'll switch over to the other side. Now the other side, there's one extra part that needs to be replaced, and that is the front drive axle. But once again, we'll slap the old parts back on, put the new front drive axle in place, bolt it in, and then put the tire on. There we go. That's the front of the car done. Now we need to move over to this side. Now I can already see where the bushing is. It's this one right here. So we'll just quickly replace it with a new one. And then I do believe the only other two parts we had to do was the rear wheel hub and the sway bar rear end link. Now the rear end link is this little piece of contraption right there, and as you can see, it needs to be replaced, but in order for us to do that, the wheel needs to come off. And I'm wondering if the rear wheel hub is on the same tire. Yes, it is. It's on the same side, so both problems are luckily on the same side, so it's easy to fix, and we won't have to jump to the other side at all. So remove the wheel hub cap, remove the wheel hub itself. Now while that's off, we are going to replace the rear end link as well. And now it's simply a case of assembling everything again to where we now just need to slap everything back together. So, choose the new part, bolt it back into place, put the rear wheel, the hub cap back in, the brake disc, the brake pad, the brake caliper, and then afterwards the tire itself, and then this job is done. Okay, so before we finish off, we're sitting on 1,458 XP and $5,200. So we finish this off, we're going to get $2,000 for that. Quite simply because the front drive axle and the steering rack aren't cheap parts. So obviously we have to charge for the parts and the labor, and we got bonuses for obviously completing the job. So that'll obviously jump to about 7,280, and our experience will be at 1,500. So we've got about 100 and something XP off of that job. So let's have a look. What other jobs have come in? Now, obviously, as you can see, our lists are growing. From our very first job, where it was simply just a case of replacing the timing parts or the outer tie rod or something like that. Now it's becoming a little bit more detailed. There's starting to be more than just one job on the list. Now, for example, this one over here, change engine oil and the filters, and then obviously the car's filters need to be replaced. It's a very, very easy job, but it's introducing the notion of there being two lists, two things that you need to do on the vehicle. So while it's popping up over here, let's have a look. So I mentioned in our last episode on the left hand side by the task description, you normally only have one list that you have to work with. Now we've actually got two. It's a very easy job, but it's introducing the notion that later on you might have 3, 4, 5 lists running down the side, and it becomes massive jobs. Obviously massive jobs means quite a bit of cash and quite a bit of XP. So we need an air filter, a fuel filter, and an oil filter. Pretty straightforward. So quite simply, we're just going to type in filter. So it is the air filter, the fuel filter, and the oil filter. Now, I haven't gotten any other part, because if we have a look at the filters, that says air, fuel, and oil. Now, if we go over to changing the oil, it says oil filter again. So you need to sometimes be careful that you don't buy duplicate parts. Obviously, you can keep it for later on, because guaranteed you are going to need it later on. But in this case, me replacing the one filter, because the car only has one oil filter, will tick off both jobs. So it's simply a case of, let's move this over to the new platform. Raise it up. And once again, we're going to have to drain the oil itself first, because obviously we need new oil in the car. So it's going to come out all black and gunky. And we can now go ahead and actually, while we're down here, replace the oil filter itself. So it's simply just a case of switching it out for the new one. Bright and blue, shiny and new. Move that out the way and drop the car, because that is everything we needed to do under the car. Okay, so the next two parts we need to do is the fuel filter. That's this part back here. And then we need to pop off the cover for the air filter itself. Remove that clip. Remove that clip. And both of those clips done. And there we can see that air filter is pitch black. It needs to be replaced. It is dirty as fuck. So put the new part back in. As you can see, it's bright and new. Nice and clean. And then we just need to replace the clips that we took off. Okay, now we can pop over this way and just make sure that we replace the fuel filter as well. And there we go. Close the hood. And that is both jobs done. The only thing we haven't done, which I actually forgot to be honest, is to obviously replace the oil. Because we drained it, cleaned it out. We now just need to slap some new oil in there. It looks like we're using 30 weight. There we go. Oil is done. Close the bonnet. Slap that done. And we got $281 from that. So let's have a look. So the next job looks like it could be a big one. There's lack of engine power. The list is provided, however, and the car's filters needs replacing. So that one is relatively easy. The other one though is repair all engine faults and put in new timing parts. So let's have a look. New timing parts. We'll take this one. The new timing parts and find and replace all engine and fix all engine problems. So I wonder if they're actually going to introduce the notion of... Nope, they didn't. Okay, so it's still at least telling us what we need to do. So first of all, the standard timing parts. So we need the belt tensioner itself. We need the timing belt. That one. And we need the water pump. Am I correct? Belt tensioner, timing belt, water pump, done. The next thing we need is the fuel rail DI. Now that stands for direct injection. So we need the fuel rail direct injector for a 1400. There we go. And the next thing we need is the intake manifold for a direct injection engine. Oh, I can't spell. Intake manifold. Oh my gosh. Okay, so intake manifold, 14 liter, 1.4 liter direct injection. Oh my gosh. Okay, I have completely forgotten how to English today. An oil pan and a radiator. So we'll just quite simply type in pan. We need an oil pan for 1.4 liter, and we need a straightforward radiator. Now, as far as I know, all of these jobs I can do from the top. No, I can't. The oil pan needs to be done underneath, but we can do that last, because we are going to have to drain out the oil in any case. But let's jump into the engine first, and let's replace these parts. So we'll take off the throttle, and here's the intake manifold that needs to be replaced. And the fuel injectors are right underneath this as well. So there's the fuel rail. We'll replace that with the new one. Put the new intake manifold on. There we go. Come on, last one. And slap the throttle back onto that car. There we go. So now it's simply a case of dropping down to the side over here and removing the timing parts once again. Now you guys should be pretty familiar with this job. I think I've done it about 3 times. So some things will become repetitive. Some things you will obviously have to do more than once. Obviously, with it being an engine, yes, a lot of different engines vary, but at the end of the day, you are doing the same job. So I mentioned in the last episode when I ended off that, yes, this game in the beginning can become repetitive. And I'm going to be honest, it really does get repetitive. I mean, the first couple of jobs you're doing, especially when you're still in the early 4,000, 5,000 XP, yes, the jobs become a lot bigger. The complexity of the jobs are a lot more. And they don't hold your hand by telling you what the problem is anymore. However, it's still the same jobs. And obviously, after you've done the same vehicles quite a couple of times, then you'll obviously get more familiar with the vehicles and the jobs will become quicker. Now, the nice thing is this XP-based progression means that in the beginning, you aren't going to be introduced to the expensive high-end supercars. You're going to be dealing with your average Joe day-to-day vehicles that everybody drives. Because these are obviously the vehicles that you've got experience on, and these are the vehicles that, quote-unquote, the customer or the customers trust you with. So they will only send in these jobs. Later on in the game, when you start getting to about 7,000, 8,000, 10,000 XP, they start trusting you with 1 or 2 supercars. When you start getting to 15,000, if you've got the DLC, you start getting things like Maseratis and Mercedes and that. Those kind of boys start rolling into your shop. But this job is almost done. The only thing we need to do on this one is replace the oil pan and the radiator. The radiator I can do from the top here. So let's remove the radiator fan itself. Slap out the radiator. Switch over, put in the new radiator, and put that fan back on. However, in order to finish off the last job, we have to get under the car. Come on, go up. Okay, so now it's simply a case of draining out the existing oil that was in there. So you see there was nothing wrong with the oil. However, we do have to drain it in order to replace that pan itself. So now we can remove the pan. As you can see, that pan has seen way better days. But now that that is off, we can go ahead. We can slap the new pan on, bolt it back into place. And that should be this job done and dusted. Should I have a look? Yes, we can. But once again, before we can actually finish off the job, we drained the oil. So we need to obviously slap some new oil in there. There we go. Oil's been replaced. Close that bonnet. And we made another $2,149 off of that job. And that's quite simply because that intake manifold and that fuel rail, they aren't cheap. So we are almost at 2,000 XP and we've got $8,531. Let's have a look. Maybe we've got time for one more small job. It doesn't, however, look like there is a small job because lack of engine power could be anything. They could be asking us to replace one of the pistons, and obviously you guys know how big those jobs are. The other one is the car's filters needs to be replaced, and then the second job on a Malak, I'm guessing that's the car's name, knocking noise from the engine bay and put in new timing parts. But I don't think we're going to do that in this episode. So as you can see, we are making progress. XP and dollars are going up. Now I'm possibly going to do some work on my own off of camera just to get us moving a little bit further ahead so that we could possibly get some more experience, start getting some more cash, so that we can start looking at doing things like painting the cars, testing the vehicles, possibly putting them on the dyno, playing around with that a little bit more. It's going to be a while before I have the parking lot because you need 9,000 XP before you are able to buy the garage, and you also need 50 grand in order to buy the extension. So we are possibly going to have a look at what the future holds for this. But once again, I am loving this game, and I hope you guys are enjoying and possibly learning something from this. That's one of the things I mentioned in the last episode, that apart from this game being a shitload of fun, it is to a certain degree educational about vehicles and the parts that basically a vehicle is constructed from, basically the inner workings of that thing you use almost every single day. But if you guys are enjoying this episode, and if you guys like that video, then by all means, leave a like and subscribe, and I will see all you beautiful people in my next video. But obviously, until then, cheers.